So in yesterday's video, I spoke about Julian Palmer's experience with the Phyllodium, and he replied to the video. I'm not sure if it's visible to everyone since it seems that YouTube censored it for some reason, so it remains hidden. But he replied to the video and commented on the conclusions I made in the video. And he was pretty adamant that he had this experience and his research on the plant is valid, and he didn't use just that single data point that I mentioned. And that's a pretty good indicator that he indeed did have the experience that he shared in his trip reports. So just to supplement his idea and his theory on the Soma plant, he added another reference to Trout's notes, and he referenced the gangetium, and he mentioned that the fresh material had a much higher yield than the dry material, and that's confirmed by the Gazli paper. And in that paper, the yield was around 0.05%, and that's nearly double what the correct yield for the Soma plant that he attributes to. So even with the 0.5 or 0.05% yield, it's still far below the 0.2% that was circulating a long time on the internet and was referenced in Julian's paper or his video. But it does bring back some more validity to his claim that 50 grams of the tea is active. The 5-MeO at 25 milligrams, by some reports, is active orally. It's not 100% definitive, since there are lots of mixed reports. Some say it's not active and they tried it themselves. And overall, it's just like a mixed report in general. But another thing that would add supporting his claim is I got messages from other watchers and some replies as well on other forums and threads that I placed the correction on. And someone purchased seeds from the same vendor that I got mine. I got mine from Gardenshaman in, I think it's Austria or Germany. And the seeds that he's selling is likely the wrong species. Someone did an analysis on the plant that comes up, and they found bufantine, and the Gardenshaman seeds seem to be long peas and not the correct species that Julian shares his experience of. In the papers that are used as the reference in Trout's notes, bufantine is present in these plants, and strangely the author he decides to demethylate the 5-MeO, and the result of his demethylation, it resulted in a salt that was in its properties identical to bufantine. In general, I found that a little strange, but I'm not very strong on the chemistry side of this hobby. But the bufantine doesn't seem to be a huge shocker, but the person that shared this information mentioned that he did not find any DMT or 5-MeO DMT in only bufantine. So it just adds to the lore and the backstory to this plant, which like I mentioned, no one in the past 7 or 8 years has come close to replicating Julian's experience. And the possible reason is because we all have the wrong species in general. The Gangeticium is actually a bit more interesting, in my opinion, than the PP, the abbreviation for the other one, since it does hold more, at least reference material to the claims of its content. But even with these reports, there hasn't been any reattempts that show similar yields. In China, there were more papers released more recently, but the yields were much, much lower than the ones proposed in this Indian paper. And another issue with the claim that fresh material is better suited than dry material would be the fact that the genus split up, and the Gangetinium is now in another species, or another genus. It's Pluribus, and due to genetic differences in the genus, we can't just assume that the enzyme behavior and the fresh versus dry content would hold true for both of them, since they're not in the same genus anymore. It is completely possible, but again, that's just a wild claim. In general, Julian's claims on this plant have always been very interesting. I personally have read his experience report, and it even incentivized me to grow this plant myself, or attempt to. I personally have zero issues saying that I'm wrong, and if you've watched a few of my other videos, I'm wrong fairly often, and I have no problem with that. I like to experiment a lot and see different venues and different avenues and paths for basically the same destination. And through questioning and experimenting myself is how I learn and get a deeper relationship with these plants. So overall, this just adds to the lore of this still fairly rare plant in cultivation. Apparently, almost everyone has the wrong species, so any claims that the experience that Julian had is false or fake would lie on the grower themselves. But the issue with all of this is that there needs to be repeated experimenting and similar results to verify that it actually occurred. Julian did mention that he shared the tea over the years with different people, over like shipping the tea to different people, and a portion of them did have strong experiences while others didn't have any experience at all. He also mentioned that sometimes 50 grams is enough, while other times he needed 100 grams fresh material. So the variation and variability of this plant is quite wide, and it just adds to the issue of this plant. So I also emailed Trout, and it's pretty incredible that he takes the time to respond to his emails. He replied that with this calculation, he very likely did a manual calculation, and in fact that is what happened, since the yields aren't directly in the paper. But he did include the raw data underneath his calculations, so it was either just a typo or a miscalculation by the decimal point. And in fact, the data was always in front of us. We just didn't take too close a notice to it. But in any case, after so much time researching and the community having tried to grow this plant, it's just weird that a simple decimal made a huge difference to this specific plant and the yield and the experience itself. So a cool thing I like about the community in general is, even if I'm wrong or the topic has already been resolved, I sometimes get some responses and messages from different projects and people interested in like similar topics. And I also got a few updates on the Phyllodium, I think that's how you pronounce it. It's the DMT grasses that a few years ago were a bit more popular than they are now. And there's a project going on that they update once in a while on DMT Nexus. And they have a very nice selection of clones that they're researching more and more, that some of them are very high in 5-MeO DMT and others have a near pure DMT profile. And it's just a very cool project in general. Personally, I would be growing the grasses if I had the space, but since I have a few projects going on already, I decided to just let that group do their own research, since I'll probably just not give it enough attention. But it was very cool for them to reach out, and they do a very good job documenting and trying to do very nice research on that plant. So in general, I don't think Julian took it as a personal attack, and if he did, it wasn't my intention. But regardless, since no one has been able to verify his claims, it's pretty natural for people to question it and its validity. Just like people should question all of my experiences, and if they want to, they can always test it themselves. My experiments with ethylene and other plants in general, you should always question it regardless. My claims that ethylene increased the biosynthesis by around 70% is fairly easy to verify and replicate yourself. So peer reviewing is fairly important. I could just make wild claims and I wouldn't expect anyone to just believe me just because I said so. But in general, like I mentioned in the original video, I'm not claiming that Julian is a liar and outright liar. But considering that no one has been able to verify his claims is fairly strange after 8 years. At least publicly, no one has corroborated his story. But indeed, this plant is a 5-MeOI yielding plant. So hopefully someone is able to get legitimate seeds so that the community could probably grow this plant and see if they can get either a similar experience to Julian or get yields from extraction similar to the papers that are always referenced in the reference material. And yeah, if you guys have any more information on the plant, the Phyllodium, if you guys have any experiences yourself, I would love to actually read or hear from you. If you're growing the plant yourself, if you got it from gardenshaman, it's most likely the wrong ID. The Japanese member from Instagram that I mentioned, he replied offering me seeds. Maybe I should take him up on his offer in the future. But for the time being, I'll just let other people try to explore this plant. I'm fairly interested in the Seer Seeker, and I'm also interested in the future trying the Phytomia. The Seer Seeker, I had a fairly surprising experience. It was still fairly mild, but considering the low dose of just 1 gram dried, I didn't expect such a visual disturbance. And the plant is finally starting to grow back. Someone on DMT Nexus, they were able to purchase a plant and they had it tested, and they were pretty shocked by the results of the lab results. It came up with a peak near the DMT location, or the 5-MeO-I DMT location, but it was a very small peak and they didn't know exactly what to make of it. There is literally no documentation on the alkaloids of this plant, but there is reference material through Trout's notes on ayahuasca analogs that they cite a tribe that previously used this plant before being introduced to the Psychotria Verdes. And yeah, just an update on the video from yesterday. I guess the lore will continue to grow, and hopefully one day we'll be able to verify the content of the true Soma plant.